Welcome to the BioStock studio at Medical Village in Lund. Today we're going to have a call with Rami Levin, CEO and President of the Saniona, um, Danish and now also US biotech company that's communicated just hours ago, basically, that they have raised one large sum of money in the US, 65 million US dollars, which is quite unprecedented for a Nordic small cap biotech company. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us today, Rami Levin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Would like to start with simply asking you the timing of this capital raise, which is significant in Nordic terms. What can you comment on that, the timing?
Well, I would say obviously we've been working on this for months now. This is not something that you turn around in a week. I've been very open and clear from day one when I started back in January that we need to expand our shareholder base and bring in institutional investors and specifically healthcare institutional investors, and even more specifically, healthcare investors from the US. And that's what I've been focusing on. It's been months and months in the making, and of course, COVID, brought another layer of complexity to this whole process. And obviously, I'm happy that we were successful despite COVID. But it's been months in the making. Selecting the appropriate bank to work with. Going out not so much on the road, but constant phone calls with all the relevant investors, telling our story because not many knew who Saniona was, telling our story and convincing them of the benefits that not only Saniona has, but of course that Tesomed in our early research. Attracting a lead investor, which obviously in the form of RA Capital couldn't have been a better lead, which then in turn obviously helped a lot to attract other investors in because they're so well respected and ultimately, close the deal yesterday and announce it. And so it's been months in the making. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a fantastic outcome. I think we're all extremely excited.
A good summer's work, or even more than that, of course. As you
Sure.
mentioned, there are a number of US and international healthcare investors participating in this direct share issue. And you mentioned the RA Capital Management took the lead. You had Pontifax Venture Capital and also New Leaf Venture Partners, to mention a few of the names. From a Scandinavian point of view, I think it's noteworthy that you have no less than 3 Swedish pension funds also stepped in as owners then. Would you like to comment on the general level of interest for Saniona that you experienced then during these last months talking to the international investors?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Obviously the challenge initially we had was lack of awareness. Very few really knew who we were. Very few knew our story. So we really had to take the time to talk about Saniona as a company, the transition, my vision for the company moving forward, go through the science, of course, kind of halfway through the process, we came out with our hypothalamic obesity data, which obviously helped as well. So then we had to, go back to those that we presented to and share that data, and obviously moving forward, share that data as well with everyone else. But ultimately, getting these investors is phenomenal. And for those who maybe are less familiar in Scandinavia with these very specialized healthcare investors, they are absolutely top-notch investors, very well respected. Their diligence when they do diligence, and they did diligence on us, of course, is very, very thorough, which is exactly why many of the other investors trust their process. So to get them on board, I think speaks volumes to not only Saniona, but our products and how they trust in what we plan to do. And I think that in turn attracted all the other investors to come on board. I was actually just informed earlier today that never have three AP funds in Sweden come together into one transaction. So, not only did we attract very well respected healthcare investors in the US that not only were able to help us conclude this deal, but even, or as important or more important, will be able to pave the way for us as we move forward with, getting a listing in the U.S. And so that's number one. But also in Scandinavia, getting all three AP funds together, I just heard this morning, has never been done before in one transaction. So I think all in all, when you look at our portfolio, one of the banks told us just yesterday that we probably are the company with the strongest shareholder list in the Stockholm exchange, which is flattering, but I don't know if it's true. But I think more importantly, what it highlights is the credibility that these shareholders bring. And not only was it so important to be able to seal this deal, but it's even more important as we plan our next steps in the U.S.
Well, congratulations to a great achievement, I would say. And speaking of the specialized shareholders, specialized investors with a very thorough due diligence process going into an investment, is there anything you can say about the investment horizon of these investors? Because I would imagine that the Swedish pension funds are not in it for a short trade. So, do you know anything about their vision for their investment in Saniona?
So I have to say that the prerequisite for any investor coming into this deal was that they are long-term investors. We are not looking for short-term investors, and none of these investors, not in the U.S., not Israel, not in Scandinavia, none of them are short-term investors. So that was a must-have before we even spoke to any investors. So I can absolutely say with confidence that all the investors in this deal are long-term investors. And may I add, not just long-term investors, but many of them have very, very big funds. So, whatever they invested here, there's still plenty more to invest as we go to an IPO at some point next year.
Probably very reassuring for shareholders. The new shares were issued at the subscription price of $2.12 per share, which is the equivalent of about Swedish crowns 1850. So there was a significant discount, approximately 45%. What's your comment on this discount level?
Yeah. So we all recognize that this is a very large discount in Sweden, and maybe unheard of discount in Sweden. It's not unheard of and not uncommon in the U.S. I should just start by saying that. So it's not uncommon. The other thing I would say is, this, as I mentioned up front, this deal has been in the making for quite a while. And when RA agreed to be the lead in this deal, our share price was at around 25, 26. And on the basis of that, they agreed to be the lead. The discount at that stage would have been by far lower than what it is now. And then all of a sudden, I think about 3.5 weeks ago, maybe even 4 weeks ago, our share price jumped from 25, 26 to 35, 36. It also went up to 40 for no reason, nothing that we proactively did, no news announcement, no data, nothing that came from us. It just jumped. And of course, on one side, you're happy your share price goes up, but it really jumped at the worst time possible as we were trying to price this deal. So, of course, it negatively impacted ultimately the discount that we had to give to go back to that share price that they initially calculated and agreed to price the deal at. The risk, of course, is if we don't agree to that deal, then RA do not agree to the deal and they're out, and the whole deal falls apart, and there is no deal. Of course, the exchange rate did not help us either. With the dollar kind of being weak now, didn't help either. but I think more importantly, and I do know that there's some frustration or anger about the discount. I do though want to point out that I just listed the reasons, and those are very objective reasons. That's exactly what happened. But I think the better way to look at it is to look at the quality of investors, which we did touch on, that we were able to bring on board. And everyone that I have spoke to said, to be able to get R8 Capital as your lead, every company will be very envious to have them, and then to have New Leaf and Pontifax and, the three, pension funds in Sweden and Arctic and just an incredible group of well-respected investors is worth the discount, because what they will be able to do moving forward is not only add money if needed, but as I said earlier, will help pave the way to an IPO. So the discount is large, but I think more importantly, it will allow us now for the first time ever in the Saniona history, ever, to stop focusing on these little tiny amounts of money that we try to raise that give us another few months of runway, um, to completely refocus our efforts in building the company once and for all, and driving Tesomet all the way to registration 2.5 years from now, to advance SAN 711 903 into phase one, to build the organization here in the US. Those are things that guaranteed without this $65 million, we would not be able to do. And if you think in the long run what this company can be, this company can be $1 billion to $2 billion company. But the only way it will be $1 billion to $2 billion company is if we advance Tesomet and bring it to the market. And for that, we need money to conduct the clinical trials. If we are not able, or we're not able to raise this money, we were not able to initiate the clinical trials, which means Tesomet would never get to the market, and we would never become a $2 billion company. So yes, the discount is steep, but we got investors that are critical. And more importantly, what it allows us is to drive this company forward and create $1 billion to $2 billion company, as opposed to a company now that is, market cap is maybe 100 to 120 million. So I think that's how really you need to look at it as a long-term investor and what the potential of this company is. And the potential is huge.
Well, yesterday when the news broke, there was a short-term reaction that was a bit negative. However, the share price now on the Stockholm Exchange has bounced back, and probably the long-term vision that you are talking about here has probably then started to sink in with investors. Speaking of your clinical advancement, then could you tell us something shortly about the current status of your PVS and HO projects going on?
Sure. Before I say that, can I just add one more thing? Because I heard another comment around dilution, and investors are not happy with the dilution. And I think, while I understand it, the immediate impact is indeed the dilution. I do think, going back to what I said, that the best way to look at it is, would you prefer to have 5% ownership in the company that is worth 100 or 120 million dollars, or would you prefer to be 2% owner in the company that is worth $1 billion to $2 billion? And I think everyone would agree that a 2% in a $1 to $2 billion company is by far better than a 5% in a $100 million company. And that's how I would really encourage everyone to look at it. I do understand the immediate impact right now, but if you are a long-term shareholder, which is really the ones that we want to attract, then that's how you should look at it. Where do we believe, all of us, that the company will be in 3, 4, 5 years down the line? And as I said, I do believe this will be, or could be, $1 billion to $2 billion company when we bring Tesomet to the market and we advance our earlier research, and et cetera. So to your question on the clinical development, everything is a go, full speed ahead. We are working with the FDA, both on Prader-Willi syndrome and hypothalamic obesity. We are finalizing the study designs. We're sharing them with the FDA for their feedback. Our goal has not changed. We want to get an IND approved in both indications before the end of the year to be able to initiate both trials either by the end of this year or early next year.
That's great. So what would be the major milestones or important news that you expect to be able to communicate going forward, say for the rest of 2020?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, the IND submissions and the IND approvals will be announced. I think that is a huge milestone when we get them. The initiation of the clinical trials, PWS and hypothalamic obesity, will be critical. We will also obviously inform the market as we start hiring executives into the organization. So, of course, that will be announced when those come in. It'll be an exciting 6 months, and of course a lot more to come as we go into next year, and then we have the first patient into the clinical trial, and it kind of as we move on, of course, the IPO at some point, and later on, study results, and at some point, submission and approvals kind of further down the road.
Yeah. So last but not least, then I would say that Saniona is at this point quite unique in terms of just clinical development in Prader-Willi syndrome, because there have been competing drug candidates that have failed or been subject to setbacks. What do you consider to be the most crucial in order for Tesomet to reach the market and to benefit patients in the long run?
I think that's a great question. First I would say, of course, the failure of the other studies obviously is a disappointment to patients who desperately need a solution for Prader-Willi syndrome. So whether the patients who were part of the study and ultimately the study failed, or patients who were not part of it but were waiting for the results and ultimately an approved product, of course it was a disappointment. I do think we still need to see what the FDA says, because while they both missed the primary endpoint, they were able to show some efficacy in either secondary endpoints or subgroup analysis. So we need to see how the FDA will view that, and will they give them an approval, or will they give them a limited approval? I think we still need to see. It's not Milendo completely abandoned the program, but not Levin nor Soleno did that. So I think we still need to wait and see what happens. But from a Saniona perspective, I think one of the biggest advantages that we are just slightly behind is that we can actually learn from all of that. So we incorporated a lot of the comments from Soleno, or the challenges that Soleno faced, into our clinical trial. We're addressing COVID and how we track patients during a clinical trial, trying to move away from face-to-face meetings if that's not possible. So we're trying to learn from the mistakes as well as some of the good things that they have done and incorporate into our design, which we will then share with the FDA, get their endorsement and approval, and then initiate the trial.
Well, we sure are looking forward to following this exciting journey that has clearly taken a very interesting new step then now with this transaction, $65 million in the bank. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rami Levin, CEO and President of Saniona.
Thank you so much for having me.
Looking forward to talk to you again soon.
Me too. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.